All right, welcome to another look at satire in pop culture and satire in literature. This week I read chapters 15 through 25 of Black Buck, and I must say that I'm enjoying the book now. I mean, there's so many things to say about it. Um, Sometimes I feel like I'm so critical of artists. I'm enjoying it. I don't know if it deserves the hype that it's getting. That said, I'm enjoying it. And so I have a number of lists of things that I wrote down, and I'm just gonna kind of go through them, and I'm gonna do a little bit of a little talk at the end. So number one, Darren's apology is insincere. I really believe that it's insincere. It's pretty obvious that it's insincere. He only apologizes for the reason that Soraya wants him to apologize, and the apology I'm talking about specifically is the apology that Darren does to um, his friend Jason after beating Jason physically bad. Um, and of course, it's going to be insincere. If you apologize only because someone makes you apologize and you don't want to apologize, even if you can be really convincing of the apology, it's still, in essence, insincere. The next thing that I have, number two, what does Buck represent? I've thought a lot about this. The dollar, of course, Starbucks, greed, money, um, wealth, manipulation. It's interesting what, I see what the character does with the term buck, and there are many other metaphors that one could have for the term buck. Number three, Buck has changed in that he drinks now. Buck has definitely changed throughout the novel. Some of the changes aren't really justified for me. Even his drastic change to this person that doesn't get along with it. I mean, that's separate from his girlfriend now, and he's not the kid in the neighborhood, that everyone knows. He's totally different, but that change is just shifted too greatly for me. And I'm not really sure how artists go about justifying these changes or when they have these changes throughout novels because they're inevitable. Characters will go through changes, they will grow, um, they will become more redeeming characters, less redeeming characters, whatever it may be. And I think the challenge for me is how do artists and writers make it so it's somewhat believable for me? And on that note, I don't know, like, does it have to be believable? Should I just let it go? I mean, yeah, I'm not even sure. Like, it just is what it is. It's a novel. I don't know if it has to be the most believable thing for me. Hope that makes sense. Number three. Am I on number three? Yeah, number three. No, I'm on number four. Um, what number am I? So Buck has changed in the he drinks now. So I just read that number three. Sorry. Number four. Buck stopped sex for work. So Buck was having an argument with his girlfriend Soraya, and then they start to have sex, and then Buck sees himself on, or sees his news. He sees the news and sees that his company's on the news, and he literally stops having sex. And it's interesting to that scene. I would definitely will put in a movie, and I'm not a fan of books made into movies. However, that scene showed a lot about his transition, and maybe that is a part of the transition that I'm looking for. And Soraya gets really upset when he stops to have sex to look at the news and to think about work. And I was already kind of confused by the fact that they were having sex because they were arguing, and then they just kind of started to have sex, and then they're arguing again. So that whole dynamic, that whole scene was very interesting. Um, Number five, here's a quote. Fuck that old Darren. I announced to the empty room. I'm Buck. And maybe this is the scene that I'm looking for where it's like he shifted. Um, I mean, I think he maybe have shifted. I mean, I may have to go back and look at this quote again, but because what I'm looking for, or what I'm find myself like trying to find is like this transition, but from Darren. I don't want to call him good at two shoes, but Darren, the guy who everyone respects and likes, versus this Buck who no one really respects. And maybe if I look back at the novel now, I will see this like from this point on when he says this quote, "Fuck that old Darren," quote, "Fuck that old Darren," I announced to the empty room. I'm Buck, unquote. So maybe at that point is the transition that I'm looking for. Number six, Buck and Darren are two different people, definitely. Um, Darren is the more caring, more, you know, kind-hearted person, and Buck is the more manipulative, more greedy person, if you will. Seven, Buck disrespects Soraya's dad, which is an interesting scene. And again, if there's a movie, I would love to see this scene in there. Um, Essentially, Soraya's dad is trying to let Buck know that Buck's company that he works for is, maybe he needs to think about, maybe Buck needs to think about a different company, and Buck usually he even says it in that scene that ordinarily he would think, ordinarily he says he would like, be patient and maybe say an apology, but no, he says he's not doing that now. He's very disrespectful to Sarai's dad. Um, and I would love to have seen Sarai be more in that scene, more, um, more determined, more forceful, if you will. She's just more like when her dad and her boyfriend, who's Buck, start to argue. She's like, "Oh, I get the tea," or she's trying to change the subject and calm things down. But I wish she would be more assertive and on top of things. Next thing, number eight, the mother has a feminist perspective. She attempts to take charge of Darren by taking him to church, which I thought was very interesting. And the neighbor person who I forget, Mr. Rawlings, was very interesting in this scene too. It's almost as the mother, well, the mother knew that she was about to die, which is an interesting part that happened too. The mother passes away. And again, some of this I don't know if it's believable, and I think I need to get away from that point whether it's believable or not. Um, I think a lot of people who read this book would have saw this coming. That the mother was going to pass away. Um, Number nine, quote, "But I couldn't go back to who I was now." Sorry, quote, "But I couldn't go back to who I was, not now," unquote. And so I need to find out where this specifically is, but I do think this is an interesting quote, being that he's saying, "Look, I'm here, I'm this guy, I'm Buck." He even, like tells people that he's Buck. He's not going to go back to Darren. And it would be interesting to see specifically, like, the steps that the persona that he develops from this point on to the rest of the book. Or maybe he's going to decide to go back to Darren. Who knows? It's interesting. So here is another meta scene that I like to call it, a scene wherein the narrator stops literally to talk to the reader. Quote, "Reader, in the same way there is no such thing as a halfway crook, there's no such thing as a halfway success. In sales and life, you're either all in or you're not. And if you're not, then step the fuck aside before you get run over by someone who is." Unquote. This is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, the Halfway Crook is a reference to a hip hop band in the early 90s, mid 90s, that began in the mid 90s. And the name of the group was called Mob Deep, and the song was Shook Ones. And in essence, this line kind of talks about like you're either a crook or you're not. And I think, or you're either going to do something or you're not. And what he's, I think, getting at is here is like you're either all in or you're all not. And I think it's maybe that sales mentality. You're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. In the last bit of writing that I have there, that's not meta. Quote, "I close my eyes and grip the receiver tighter. It means you own me, Barry. I'm yours." So essentially, what this is about is where Buck kind of saves someone by selling some merchandise to this character Barry, like lots of it. And but Barry says, "You own me." Barry says, "In order to do this, you're gonna work for me. I will own you when you're not with the other company." Um, and so he has to say at the end of the conversation, "I'm yours." So there's a lot of this like ownership themes because it feels like someone owns Barry, who was Darren, and it also seems like now. So it seems like say that again. So it seems like someone owns Barry. Someone owns Barry. Someone owns Darren, who is the same character as um, who's the same character as Buck. And it also seems now that Barry owns Buck. And so it's just interesting to look at some of the choices that the writer is making and why the writer is making it with this "I own you" kind of thing. Maybe this is the culture of companies, um, and maybe this is the message that the owner's trying to convey. Like we own you as long as you're a part of this. You no longer have, in essence, you are owned by us. And it makes me wonder, like, to ask people who work at, some tech companies or companies in general, like, do they feel owned? I hope they don't feel owned. Okay, number 11, Beck is doing drugs. Buck is doing drugs, which is interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. 12, Clyde probably wanted to call Buck the N word. So Clyde, who works at someone, says to Rhett, who's in essence the boss, you have to choose between Buck and myself. And Rhett's like, I'm not gonna do this. So I'm not gonna pick between the two of you. And Clyde says you either you have to pick. This is what Clyde says. Pick Buck or myself. And at one point, Clyde probably wanted to call Buck the N word, and Buck knew this. And it was interesting to see that the N word has been brought up a lot, like that a white person might use it. And it makes me think that it might happen in the novel. Number 13, Clyde quit. So yeah, and I noted that because Clyde is a big character in this book, and it's interesting to see him leave. Number 14, Buck keeps women away for they ask too many questions. Um, um, he seems to be like I don't know, like he sleeps around, has a different woman every night. He wakes up in the morning, he can't call the woman's name correctly because he's just used to different women. And one woman in particular says, "You were talking in your sleep last night. You said something about Jason and Soraya and Mr. Rawlings and Ma and all these different characters from his past." And he gets upset and he says, in essence, that's one reason why he doesn't see one woman often because they ask too many questions. So that's a very intimate part, I think, of the character kind of shedding that facade and showing a little bit of himself, which I thought was awesome for the book. Number 15, Buck had sex with a white woman, which is interesting because I forget his name, but one character warned him against doing this, and I guess we'll see if there are some major ramifications. I mean, he did have sex with the white woman, and for me, for them, I mean, I don't know what the ramification could be. I, I, I hope it makes sense if there is some ramification. I don't know how it could make sense, but I hope it's not just him losing his job because that wouldn't. I don't know. I don't know how to even touch this subject, but I'm not sure where to go with that. Um, yeah, or the warning to not have sex with a white woman. And honestly, it's a black man. I've never heard that before. So yeah. All right, number 16. Um, Rose Butler brings life into the novel, definitely. And when I met Rose Butler, I thought, bring it on. And I thought we need a female, strong black female in this book. It just felt right. And then I thought, well, we had the mom, but the mom definitely was strong, but she didn't have the sass that Rose has. And I think again, like if this is going to be a movie, Rose needs to be in this. which I probably wouldn't watch because when they turn books into movies, they just aren't the same. All right, number 17, I have a quote. And you both managed to not only convince a subway full of white people that they are black, but also they were proud of it. If that's not sales, I don't know what it is. Psst. Rose said, that's not hard. Rappers who let white people sing nigga at their concerts do it every night. And so this is a scene where Buck took Rose and Brian out and on the subway, and he said, I want you to dance and sing this song and do these things. Excuse me. And um and they did it. And I thought the quote here was interesting. Um I thought this was a playful part of the book. I almost wish there were more playful parts of the book like this. Okay, number 18. The beer scene shows depth, and I hope more is done with um, scenes like this. So this scene is in particular where Rose, Brian, Jake, and Ellen um, are purchased, have beer. They're purchased beer by Buck, who says, I want you to walk by police officers or police station with your beer, and you're going to kind of convince them that you have the right to have it. Um, and it goes bad very quickly. Although there's another really playful scene, and I wish some more of these scenes were present in the book. Um, Number 19, Buck plans to hire one of the following and fire the rest: Brian, Rose, Ellen, and Jake, which I find very interesting. Sometimes the book feels like, oh, I've read something like this before, or it feels like, ugh. It just feels like he's finding himself, like he's coming back to Darren, but he's not. And at the same time, it feels like it just feels too predictable. Um, mm-hmm, it does. Um, and at the same time, Buck feels like a sellout because a lot of the characters in this book that are needing his help, or not that necessarily are needing his help, that he are providing help to, are African Americans, but he seems to not really care about them. If that makes any sense. Um, and number 20, Chauncey shows the caring side of nature of Buck. I like Chauncey as a character in the book. Chauncey is the chauffeur. I really like Chauncey a lot. And lastly, I just want to wrap up with a few things that I have here on my iPad with how I would like to conclude the reading. So I only have a few chapters left, I think, about around 11. I definitely want to finish with one, some Onion articles. Number two, some satirical music. Um, I've asked so many friends. A lot of my friends don't like reading. Some do, but almost all of my friends love music. And I've asked around for some music, some satirical music. So feel free, if you have some yourself, let me know. Um, I would love to look at New Yorker covers in cartoons because there's satire in there so much. And some satirical comedians. Um, and in addition, I would like a tentative unit plan. It will be very rough, but some things that I can say, okay, would definitely go in a satirical unit for me. And um, I would like to finish. Um, I would like to read two more books if possible. Um, the two books would be The Sellout by Paul Beatty and Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut. And lastly, I need to mention this too. I need to register, so I would like to sit down with you and talk about that. So I would love your thoughts. Just checking to make sure that I got everything. I love your thoughts on things. Um, to see, yeah, I love to check in and see what you think about things. In the chat about this book. Okay. Um, I think that will be it. Again, I'm enjoying this book. Um, and yeah, I look forward to chatting with you about it. All right. Take care.